Hello, Great Livens! This is recording on the same day, so you'll pretty much see the same yellow shirt, just don't think I wore it twice in one day. Alrighty, so let's smash all effects of mining, thermal pollution, and alien plants in one video. And it won't even be that long. So again, it will just be specifics, and then it's water purification and recycling, and then we are done for the term. Woo! And then I think we might have time for one or two revision case studies, and then we'll be done for the term. How exciting. And then you'll write my exam. Yay, it's already been set, so your breakdowns are up on your group, and you guys should be ready. Alrighty, let's begin. We find that a lot of mines need quite a lot of water to actually hold all of their solvents so that they can dissolve a lot of the precious metals that they've extracted from the ores from the earth. And the main way that they do that is by needing water. So they get the water from a lot of rivers and dams, but the problem is once they've used their water and now it's polluted, they don't have large barrels or vats to store it in, so they just pump it directly back into the river or the dam. What that means is if there are communities living along those rivers and dams, or people are using it for irrigation or drinking water, they're going to be adversely affected by whatever's in their water. A lot of the times there are extremely dangerous heavy metals, sometimes very high levels of specific salts, like we spoke about fluorine in the previous lesson. And then on the screen over there, the water taken up by the mines is cold and neutral, pH 7, and the water returned to the environment may be acidic and hot, and that's because of the solvents. Another thing to mention is that I did say that there was a lot of stuff dissolved in it, and remember that very acidic substances or solutes can actually dissolve metals. So if they get into the ground itself and into the plants can actually start absorbing a lot of these heavy metals. So if you've got crops along the entire riverway, those are also going to be absorbing heavy metals and or just any metals that are found in the ground. And that is because of that extremely high pH, right? So the release of hot water into the environment causes thermal pollution, and we'll get to that soon. So the conversion of water released by mines to acid state, an acidic state occurs as follows. So the mining of ores and coal may be exposed rocks which contains pyrite, which contains sulfur. When water runs over the pyrite, a chemical reaction takes place, making the water acidic, okay? So sulfuric acid forms. Now, if you remember correctly, sulfuric acid can actually burn the membranes of your skin. The water is called acid mine drainage, or AMD, as you did in your little activity on Monday. Not only is acid mine drainage water acidic, but it usually contains poisonous heavy metals as well, and that is because they were able to dissolve because of the extremely low pH. So there's a look at some of this acid mine drainage. You can see that it is full of a whole bunch of substances that is not just water, and that is because everything is dissolved inside of there. You'll probably find there's a lot of iron in there, especially with an orangey color, but to a large extent it's just because of all the solvents inside over there and the very low pH. All right, so let's talk about sedimentation. Mine water may contain small particles of rock and sand called sediment. Okay, so there's a definition for sediment. Sediment makes water cloudy or turbid. Remember we spoke about that in the aesthetic properties of water. This blocks out sunlight, which makes it difficult for aquatic plants and algae to grow. So this sounds very much like eutrophication, except just with very fine sand particles. The heavier particles may settle at the bottom of the river and wetlands and reduce the amount of water they can hold. This might lead onto flooding or flash flooding when there is a lot of rain, and that will cause erosion and stuff, as we spoke about when we did availability and we spoke about flooding over there. Let's talk about thermal pollution very quickly. There are two main things or main factors to deal with thermal pollution and how it affects organism. First one is directly. How does it directly affect it? Or anything in terms of heating up water. So reducing the oxygen supply in the water, since heating water drives the oxygen out of the water. So you understand that there's some dissolved oxygen in the water, and if there wasn't, fish and other aquatic animals wouldn't be able to live. If you heat up that water, and you've seen when you've left your water bottle in the sun for too long, you can see those little bubbles forming on the side of your can and or glass and or plastic, okay? And those little bubbles are actually oxygen. So it tends to do something called dissociate, okay? So when it gets too hot, it just doesn't want to be there anymore, creates little bubbles, and then it flows out, which means that if there are animals living in a river or a dam and the water is too warm, it might not have access to as much oxygen as they would like. And then we can have indirectly, so higher temperatures encourage algal blooms. This sounds exactly like eutrophication again. This is what happens in eutrophication. There we go. The plants living below the surface die. They do not receive light, decomposition of plants, decreased oxygen, and all aquatic animals die. Okay, so let's look at alien plants. An alien species has been introduced into an area which it did not naturally occur. That is a definition for alien species. Okay, that is an equivalent of an example over there called the jacaranda trees. So some alien invasive species do very well in their new environments, are reproducing and spreading quickly. So that's all I want you to take out of that first point, is that they reproduce and spread quickly. And if they can reproduce and spread quickly, that means that they're able to outcompete natural or indigenous vegetation. Remember, indigenous means naturally occurring in that environment. And if you kick out all those natural plants and trees that means you're going to affect the animals that are there. And if that natural species disappears and it's a keystone species, the entire ecosystem can collapse. So in other words, they become invasive. So a lot of the time, we don't just call them alien species, we call them alien invasive species, because they literally take over entire areas. And unfortunately, we like alien plants because most of them are pretty. We don't get them in the rest of the world, so we have them here. In natural habitats, the population size of alien species would be controlled by their natural predators and pathogens. So please think, for instance, like the flu every single year, that is a human's natural pathogen. We don't have natural predators necessary, but think about, if the amount of deer increased too much, there would be lions and all those other bits and pieces to take those numbers down. But if I bring something from another country here, they don't have natural predators and they don't have natural pathogens, which means there's nothing to keep their population size in check, and that's what allows them to just flourish completely, and they go absolutely ballistic. The picture I've put up for you is a picture of the water hyacinth in what's that dam called? Hyacinth Dam, all right? And to a large extent, and we'll go on a little bit later, you can see it's created that very dense mat, and that's because it has these air bladders at the base of their structures that allow them to float up to the surface. So what South African people went and did was they introduced the plant's natural predator, which is a type of beetle we get from, and I can't remember which part of the world right now, and it actually drills a hole which causes it to sink to the bottom, and then certain decomposers can break it down. We also introduced certain fish that were the natural predator to these water hyacinth, but unfortunately they taste really nice to other fish in Hyacinth Dam, and they were eaten very quickly, and we weren't able to reduce the amount. So there's been a whole bunch of people who've been trying to reduce the amount, but just haven't gotten there correctly. All right. Lastly, water hyacinth plants affect the water quality in the following ways. This is pretty much eutrophication. So this is just a reminder. I've highlighted some important bits. It just shows the shift from eutrophication. So the actual water hyacinth creates a continuous mat. This means that the light is unable to reach lower levels. Plants die because they can't photosynthesize. They start rotting or decomposing, and the oxygen levels are reduced because of the microorganisms eating them, and eventually with reduced amount of oxygen, aquatic animals die. Okay, simple. We remember this from grade 10 hopefully. In addition, these plants clog up waterways, making boating, fishing, and other water sports almost impossible. All right, that first little bit about clogging up waterways is important, because if we can't get water to move because of these hyacinth, that means that further down the river we're going to have not as much, or we're going to affect other natural habitats. So millions of rands have been spent each year in clearing dams and rivers. And there was a boy who actually won some sort of South African award where he had created this boat-like structure with arms, and these arms would grab them and then shred the water hyacinth. But the problem is they couldn't do it quick enough. Um, and another thing I want to point out quickly is I mentioned to you that we've brought in little insects and fish. If we bring in a plant or animal's natural predator from their country, that plant or animal itself can become a new alien invasive species. So we need to be very careful with what we can actually bring into our country and release. Otherwise, we're just going to make the entire thing worse. So I want you to think about how you would actually reduce the amount of water hyacinth and send it to the local municipalities. And if you can do it correctly, you're going to earn a lot of money, Great Lemons. All right, just one more section and we're done. Have a great day. Bye.